I've been in a knife fight against myself, and you can see the evidence there. My red badge of courage. Obviously, I hold my manhood cheap when I see what the freedom fighters of Ukraine are doing, and I'm a complete coward, especially compared to them. And maybe some of them thought the same for themselves. But it's extraordinary what ordinary people can rise to when they're in such a situation. But this video is about the future of Belarus and Russia. So the Soviet Union was dissolved in 1991, and in 1994, Alexander Lukashenko, formerly the director of a collective farm, was elected president of Belarus in what seems to have been a free election. And he was genuinely a breath of fresh air and promised to battle against graft, because of course there's corruption back in the Soviet era, but the press just weren't allowed to report it. But he quickly turned into an autocrat himself, plundering the treasury, like George Orwell's 1984 says, and he could not tell the man from pig or pig from man. But in 1999, Lukashenko and the president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, they signed a treaty that said they would eventually reunite. And they sometimes talk about the Union State. If you go to any Russian airport, there'll be a separate queue for Russian citizens and citizens of the allied state of Belarus. So the Belarusians are sort of more Russian than the Russians themselves. There is a Belarusian language, but they seldom speak it. I mean, in the countryside a little bit. Some people have even disapproved of it. But despite Lukashenko actually explicitly agreeing to full reunification with Russia, over 20 years later, that still hasn't happened. That was foot dragging for him. Did he ever intend it? See, the Biden laptop was real, funding biolabs in Ukraine and all the mental. Yes, hilarious. So you're obviously another shill for the Kremlin. Anyway, maybe Lukashenko was never sincere about that. It was just a way of extracting concessions from Russia, whilst the Russian economy is in a parlous state. The Belarusian one was in even worse condition, and they were reliant on being sold oil, gas, and so on at below cost price. They used some of themselves and sold it on. For trade advantages, all Belarusian citizens have the right to resign. But Lukashenko was dragging his feet on that. Relations became so strained with Russia about 3 years ago that Lukashenko, he began coquetting with Western countries, but it wasn't going anywhere. I mean, he's got really no precious resources himself. I mean, they export potash, which is vital for fertilizer, tractors, and so on. Not many other things. I know they make some armored personnel carriers. But then there was that contested election in 2020, contested in both senses. He had a real opposition candidate, Miss Tsikhanouskaya, and she's widely believed to have won, but Lukashenko announced that he won 80% of the votes. One of his other opponents, what's his name, Viktor Babarikin, I think his name is in prison, who was a former banker. And that Miss Tsikhanouskaya, educated in Ireland, Lithuania, speaks for all. She's the modern face of free democratic Belarus. Anyway, there were always military bases in Belarus. I mean, after the Russian military bases, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And as the Lukashenko regime became more heavily dependent on Russia, obviously that strengthened the Russian bargaining position, and Lukashenko was simply compelled to agree to everything that Putin wanted. Lukashenko sent his youngest son, Kolya, his favorite son, to boarding school. Who's there? I mean, there's a rumor that the mother of this child was actually Lukashenko's physician. He's got two sons with his wife, but he openly describes them as weaklings. Is he grooming Kolya to take over? I mean, the boy's name is Nikolai properly. He's 18 eventually. Because Lukashenko is an outspoken admirer of Gaddafi, saw him die in a ditch, and he has a very high opinion of President Bashir al-Assad of Syria, whom he described as a very European person, which I presume was meant to be a high lord indeed. Curious the way Belarusians and Russians often say their countries aren't part of Europe. When they say Europe, they mean elsewhere, but here he's using it as though it were a compliment.